I heard a podcast and an expert on HRT was saying, we can never know your dose. This is a doctor saying we can never know your dose because we don't know what your blood levels were when you were reproductive age. And that's where you need to be healthy. You need to be back there. All of this nonsense about average dose is good for every woman is garbage. That's garbage. No one knows your dose except you. This is why I offer an optimizing hormone coaching session so that we can figure out what needs to be bumped up, what you could pull back, and how you could balance out nutrition to make big changes, get this all resolved, and live your best life. That's what we want for you. This is a little disjointed, but this is a few days later, and I'm looking at the lessons learned, and I'm laughing like, oh my gosh, this has been crazy. So I'm looking at this 5 years later and shocked at all the little things I know now that I did not know then. And this is where coaching comes in, is that we focus down on your issues right now and what is driving your symptoms. So we look at 159 plus symptoms and we figure out what's driving your symptoms. But okay, so if you look back with all the wisdom I have now, I could see that the hormones on the test did not match my mental state. So that's your number one clue. If you're not feeling strong, if you're feeling weaker than expected, you're going to have an issue with hormones most likely, right? So that was the number one thing that I learned. Your hormones are just a snapshot of a single point in time. It is not your experience. Your experience is symptoms. The hormone test almost convinced me that I was okay. And so I was walking through life as if I was okay and not thinking I need to problem solve the hormones. The hormone test did not catch the days I was extra low from the heat disrupting the patch, the heat disrupting my psychiatric medicine. So the heat was highly disruptive. It was changing how my body was working, how my patch was working. So that was an issue that I did not understand. So this is going to make you laugh. That's why I put this on today, is I forgot I had this. So this is it's like a electric pulsing on the brain to try and help you sleep, calm down, have lower anxiety. This is by Fisher Wallace. Very expensive product. So if your estradiol is too low and your testosterone is too low and your progesterone is too low, you end up spending $500 on this and plugging yourself in every night with electrodes to your brain because you know something is wrong. You're like, okay, everything looks okay on the outside. What the heck is going on? Why do I feel unsupported? And that is your key to go to coaching, because you want to feel emotional support in order to problem solve this issue. It is just crazy, and it will send you down so many wrong paths if you don't get help. Get help. Get all three products and get help. Very common to be asked about dosing on YouTube comments and in other forms of social media. And I'll have to say, we really go by symptoms. We go by your symptoms at that moment. That's telling us how much product you're getting. So here's a good example. This is a very detailed example of something that happened in 2016. So I had an incredible amount of stress, and I switched doctors a few times in 2016. So this is that story to show you how things can go wacky in your life. Just a quick reminder, remember my motivation. Watching my grandmother and my mother both have autoimmune disease strike them down at menopause and Subsequently, they died very, very young. My mother died at age 60. So I knew that I was going to take charge of my health, as you will. You will do this because you don't want to end up sick for the last few years of your life. Okay, a little bit of background. Here's a photo of me in Colorado. I just finished hiking 1,000-foot vertical here at a place called Gem Lake. Gorgeous, gorgeous scenery. Such a fun vacation. I had a great time. So here I can tell you I had stable HRT dose and I had good health. I went back and looked at my test results and I was probably slightly underdosing my HRT. Based on what I know now, I was testing above normal on the hormone tests. Crazy. I had the autoimmune protocol diet, which is anti-inflammatory and has very high nutrient level. I had been on this for 3 years by the time of this health crash in 2016. I also optimized my low dose naltrexone, which is anti-inflammatory as well. Very mood boosting. Look into this. So in 2016, I felt very confident, in fact, overconfident, moving from Ohio, where my kids were born, basically, all the way to Dallas, Texas. I changed HRT doctors 3 times. I changed homes 4 times because we were in temporary housing on both sides. I became a single mother of 3 angry teens in a new city. My husband was traveling internationally. So really, it was just me and 3 angry kids. So here's a few things that went wacky. I was walking in over 100-degree Fahrenheit temperature every day because I walk every day and I had been doing this for years. One of my medicines, it turns out, is very, very sensitive to temperature, and it basically broke. And this is a medicine, Risperdal, that enhances the sex hormones in the brain. So it had a big effect. I had no friendships. I had no time with managing my angry kids in the cooking. I was trusting that my doctors knew the best HRT dose for me. And I was using experts in HRT at a woman's clinic in Dallas. At this point in time, I had no idea that my psychological health is entirely based on my HRT dose. I had no idea. Experts at the women's clinic, I thought they were experts, dropped my estradiol to a zero point zero 0.05 milligram patch, and that is considered an average dose. That's where a lot of the research lands. But I had been on a higher dose and on a gel in Ohio. Testosterone was dropped to 1 milligram, and I've learned since that 2 milligrams is probably the bottom dose that anybody can have and feel well. Then suddenly, in fact, it was the weekend we were moving in, there was a death in the family. And this increased my stress. My self-care went out the window, and I was traveling out of state for closing down a household and for a funeral. We were very uncertain of finances, so the stress just kind of went through the roof. It was crazy. Now, this was a crisis of body and mind. I definitely had a depression, and I did not go for help because of the circumstances. I really thought somehow I was strong enough to pull through this, and I really felt I was needing to pull through this to keep my family together. So sometimes the crisis is so big that you can't even figure out how to go for help. At this point, I had no family members to lean on. Everybody was in turmoil. with the death of a family member. I was re-triggered by my earlier losses and deaths. This was a real overreaction. And that's really common with low estradiol. Now I do know this. I felt impending doom. I thought my feelings were my circumstances only. I didn't realize my HRT could have been an issue. Over the course of this entire year, I went to 3 providers, in fact, more providers than this, but I went to a boutique OBGYN provider that I really trusted, and I found that more expensive care is not better care. I went to Body Logic MD, and that's a national chain, and they did a ton of testing, and very little of it was actionable. We just did not change anything about my situation. I went to a women's health clinic in Dallas where I thought, oh, this is a big clinic caring for a lot of women. Of course, it would be better care, but it really wasn't. I went to a mitochondrial specialist because my brother was having a certain type of genetic issue with mitochondria. And it turned out he loved my treatments, but never said anything about my dose. I took different types of tests, blood, saliva, and urine. None of these are accurate for mental health. They just don't count. All of my tests showed me above normal on levels of HRT and hormones. I did not feel normal. Now I know my mental health is really a key here, and you might still need a psychiatric medicine. It just might happen. Two of the big keys to my mental health was estradiol and testosterone, but I didn't know this back then. I returned to Ohio, and then I moved from the patch to a gel. This was yet another dose change, and it was a moderate dose. It wasn't a high dose. My testosterone was compounded and very inconsistent, because compounding is often inconsistent. I was not in control of my dose. My doctor was dictating my dose, and that is totally wrong. You need to be in charge of your dose and use enough testosterone to feel nice energy. So let's look at some of the science. HRT enhances your stress response. You need HRT to manage stress well. High hormones are better. High hormones of pregnancy actually protect the fetus from stress. This is an evolutionary advantage. Lower estradiol levels lead to higher stress hormones called cortisol. The second half of your monthly cycle is the dropping hormones right before your period, and that increases your stress. This is all from psychoneuroendocrinology and the effect of sex hormones. Here's a funny point. My psychologist said you need to go to an ashram, so a place where you do yoga all day, instead of saying change your HRT dose and learn how it affects your stress response. There were so many lessons from this experience. First, the hormone test did not match my mental state. It was a snapshot of a single day. Who knows what HRT was getting into my body that day? The hormone test almost convinced me I was okay, so I did not seek HRT help. The hormone test didn't catch the days my levels were extra low from the heat. And I was not educated enough to solve this problem. My lessons here: never move a teenager. Never. They're so unstable. Never assume the doctor knows your dose. Never assume your medicine works in hot weather. Don't equate a patch to a gel. I moved from different styles of HRT, and nobody asked me about my dose. Never trust a hormone test. Your symptoms are all that matters. Always go by how you feel. It's really critical to understand that your results will vary. You are an individual. You have your own genetics, your own diet, your own dose, your own other pharmaceuticals. So your HRT might be the same, but receptors are different. Brain tissue is different, so HRT feels different. 370 medications will block your HRT or change how it's working. And your hormone receptors will change as you age. Your hormone receptors will change with diet. These are all critical. Also, please know, even if you're keeping track of your doses, that a gel does not equal a patch. These two things are totally different. And a gel does not equal a patch, does not equal oral, right? So all of these things cannot be equated across. The doctor's going to try, if they get your medical records from the previous doctor or the previous series of doctors. Like I've had 12 doctors in 14 years. So I don't think anybody tracked back. I have been able to track back everything. So the other thing that was a massive issue was I had been only on 1 milligram of testosterone, and now I'm on 6. I'm optimized at 6. So it's a vast, vast difference. And nobody ever talked to me about my dose and all those symptoms related to testosterone. Remember, your results are individual. And I know this sounds really strange, and I get asked a million times, what dose should I start at? What should I be at? Where am I going to be happy? Where am I going to optimize my health? And the only way I can tell you that is through a coaching session where we have all your symptoms, and then we look at your dosages and sometimes your blood levels. That doesn't tell you much, your doses, but symptoms, right? So that's going to drive it. And then we're going to look at what's missing, if you've got something major missing, and then we're going to look across nutrition to see what's missing there. And always remember that stress, which I have a lot of stress in this story, right, can interrupt your sex hormones. All of those hormones that you're adding in can be interrupted by stress. But the other problem is that lack of hormones is stress. That's stress. And now I can make it through a pandemic with optimal hormones and not feel any depression or stress. Nothing. I am not lonely. I am not feeling bad. And on the days when I forget a dose, I start to feel bad again. So it tells you, your body tells you what it wants. And the genetics are really highly impacted. Our receptors, like the hormones going through the blood and it lands on a receptor. So those have different genetics. This HRT thing is the same across, if you're all using estradiol, it's the same, right? And then this receptor has different variability. It has different strength, right? For some women, they're really sensitive to hormones. And for others, they're like numb and it doesn't work unless you have a lot, right? It doesn't work. It needs a different dose. So you find out by how you feel. Yeah. Another lesson is never, ever move a teenager. They are working on their identity. They are working on friendships. Their focus is entirely on friendships. Parents are no longer a stabilizing factor. So this is really, really key. And coming back to Ohio was the best thing that I did. It restabilized the kids. And so that allowed me to at least pull back and feel less stress. Since your results will vary, you can come to coaching to create your master plan. We personalize everything for you. You are an individual and you need personal care. You can email me at jumpstartaip@gmail.com. I also have ebooks and courses for you. Thank you.